Hi everyone, it's Rana here. Welcome to this hotel room in Paris. I hope you're well, guys. Today is Friday, but I will be releasing this video on Saturday afternoon for the Saturday video, as you might have understood already. I wanted to share some further thoughts with you about these three subtypes of INFJ that I was suggesting existed, between the proactive INFJ, between the pure perception INFJ and the analytical INFJ. I, the analytical INFJ obviously is linked to this concept of analysis, whereas it's unclear whether the proactive and the pure perception INFJ are more linked to synthesis or to something else. My thoughts on this are that the pure perception INFJ is probably into synthesis as well as the more practical proactive INFJ, except that I think that the pure perception INFJ expresses or relates to the concept of synthesis more so in their mind, right? It's not necessarily something that they need to externalize or exteriorize. Whereas for the proactive INFJ, I think that that's something that they tend to bring out into the world, and they don't let it kind of sink in too deep in their minds before they kind of act upon it. I think that you can actually see a connection between the concept of things being good enough and the concept of proactivity. And I want to explore that in a bit more detail in this video. So first of all, when it comes to analysis, the analysis of the analytical INFJ, I see this in my wife a lot. At the moment we're spending a lot of time together, and it's obviously going to remain like this as long as we're married. But what I mean is that when we're working, maybe we will see each other in the morning and in the evening, whereas at the moment, we are on, like, we're together 24/7 essentially, and it provides great opportunities for observing how each of us operates. And something that I've noticed is that when we have a discussion, it's actually not just when we have discussion. Sometimes it really happens in the concrete real world. But it's often like, I say, oh yeah, so that what you mean is this. And she would go like, well, it kind of is, but before we move on to the next sequence of our conversation, no, let's first nail down exactly what I meant. And when I say that, sometimes it can be practical. It can be like, we could be like looking for a particular thing that we want to buy. And I find that the thing that serves the purpose, all right? But she would say, well, yeah, it serves a purpose, but that's not exactly what I want, right? And there's this insistence that it has to be exactly what she has in her mind's eye. So whether it's in the case, of those practical everyday instances, or whether it's in the course of conversation, where in order to move to the next sequence of conversation, first she needs the concept nailed down. And if I kind of find something that's good enough, it's not enough for her. This is really related to analysis, in the sense of, analysis breaking down into different components until you find the most specific essence of each component. She wants the essence, and if she doesn't get that, she's not completely comfortable with proceeding. Whereas I'd be like, yeah, no, that serves a purpose, let's move forward. Okay. In particular cases, if I'm working on a philosophical topic, or if I'm actually writing a philosophical essay, now that hasn't happened in a while now, but back then I would be more analytically inclined because the context of the work demanded that. That can happen in the case of my fictional writing as well, but otherwise I can sort of tone it down, whereas my wife can't, And I think that for the proactive INFJ, you get the sense that things are good enough because you're able to, as in, you're happy with things being good enough because instead of analysis, the orientation is more so towards synthesis, that is, not breaking down necessarily into the smallest components, but looking at different patterns, whether they're ideational patterns or practical patterns of object patterns, and seeing the commonalities and bringing them together. And then you're happy with what you come out as a synthesis of the different patterns. But of course, the synthesis is going to look like all the variety of different patterns, but it's not going to be like any single one of them. So it's going to be, in terms of resemblance, the resemblance between what's synthesized and the other patterns is going to be good enough, but it's not going to be the exact essence, which I think is one of the sources of the distinction between the proactive INFJ and the analytical INFJ, and why the proactive INFJ is able to kind of operate more proactively. The reason why I said the pure perception INFJ is more oriented towards synthesis than analysis is because it seems to me that it's very important for a pure perception INFJ to have a concrete vision that they promote. They might just promote it to themselves. They might just promote it to internally. They might not, often will not, want to impose it on other people or even share with other people. When I share with other people, you get like morphic resonance of Rupert Sheldrake or synchronicity of Carl Jung, or many other INFJs will have such concepts too, which are bound to provoke some debates, because you could argue that in some sense the analytical side is not the most at work here. What's most at work is the promotion of a creative new conception. If the analytical cap of the INFJ was the one that was the most prominent, I think there'd be a constant deconstruction of different parts, and maybe that innovative perceptual theory would never come into force in the first place, because the analytical side would already see all the different problems and stop the process. For this pure perception to take place, there has to be a bringing down of the critical component and the deconstructive component of the analytical side of the INFJ. It happens mostly in perception. It doesn't necessarily translate into everyday practice. The reason why, in the case of proactive INFJ, it tends to translate more so in everyday practice and practical, dealings with the world, and why, in the case of the pure perception INFJ, that doesn't happen, and the pure perception INFJ is more so happy to sit back with their thoughts, essentially. Even though the thoughts might not be super structured or analytical, indeed, they're still thoughts of some kind. The reason why there is a difference between those two, I still haven't quite figured out. One tempting parameter of the distinction to make would be to argue that the proactive INFJ is more extroverted and has particularly like a stronger FE function, and the pure perception INFJ is more introverted with a strong NI function, whereas the more analytical INFJ would have a stronger TI function. These parallels are tempting to make. Perhaps to some extent they're accurate. I'm not completely satisfied with them as being comprehensive, but I would love to hear what your thoughts are. Don't forget that you can support my Patreon page. Thank you to my supporters. You can also get my 2 books. My book on the INFJ, The Ecstatic Soul, available down below. If you want to check it out, it's by now it's 2 years old. Lots of reviews, lots of readers. You can check it out to see if you might like that deep dive into the psychology of the INFJ. Or my new novel, The Infinite Castle, if you're into Kafka, Dostoevsky, and existentialism, postmodernism, and if you like dark INFJs as protagonists. I will hopefully see you Sunday, guys. If I have the time to make a video on Sunday, I will. See you then. Bye-bye.